as things have slightly slowed down around here over the last month, and as Brenna and I continue to settle in over at the rectory, I've taken on a couple of small painting projects. I painted the little eating area off the kitchen a pale blue. Well, technically it was faded flax flower. I painted the tall cabinets in the laundry room the same color, partly because I had extra paint and partly just to break up the sea of white. I painted the walls in the kitchen a light beige to add a hint of contrast. Basically, I just did whatever Brenna told me to do. I think an accent wall was involved. But I actually love to take on the occasional painting project with its brushes and rollers and drop cloths and the ritual scrubbing of my hands afterwards. So much of parish ministry is about sowing seeds. You plant ideas and hopefully sprinkle in a dash of hope and inspiration, but you can never control the outcomes. That's God's job, certainly above my pay grade. The reality is that there are no finished products in ministry. When it comes to the life of the Spirit, we are all works in progress, always striving, always deepening, always growing. And so I find it immensely satisfying to take a step back and see an actual completed project, to see the tangible fruits of my labor, like a wall with 2 coats of fresh paint. And I like to hold on to that feeling of satisfaction for as long as I can, which in this case lasted just until I looked up the gospel passage appointed for today and encountered the parable of the sower. Again, ministry is all about sowing seeds. One of the things I love about this parable is that while Jesus shares it with the big crowds that gathered around him, so large he had to get on a boat to go out a little ways so the crowds could all see and hear him, he then pulls the disciples aside, away from all the commotion, and explains in detail what it really means. There's an intimacy about this exchange, a level of trust and relationship reserved for those who literally dropped everything to boldly follow him. And by letting us in on the behind-the-scenes interpretation, Jesus has basically already done the work of the preacher. In no uncertain terms, he has spelled out the metaphorical meaning behind seeing receptivity to God's word as the seed sown on the path and the rocky soil and among the thorns and on the good soil. His explanation is unambiguous and clear. Frankly, I should probably just sit down and let Jesus have the last word on this parable. But that is not my way. So please make yourselves comfortable. As always, there are nuances here that begin to emerge beneath the surface of the text. Because, of course, life isn't so neat and ordered. Our spiritual lives don't categorically fit into one of 4 quadrants. You can't go up to a crowd of people, share this story, and say, okay, everyone who considers themselves rocky soil, stand over there, and if you identify as thorny soil, go over there. Sown on a path, go there. And those who see themselves as good soil, just stay right here. And while we all like to think of ourselves as that good soil, it's always more complicated than that. The reality is that our lives are made up of a patchwork of different soils. We bear more or less fruit at different times. Some days we're particularly receptive to hearing God's word and acting on it. On other days, it gets choked by the pressing concerns and distractions of our overscheduled lives. Some days we just don't understand or can't hear God's word. On other days, we receive it joyfully, but it doesn't stick. Both as individuals and as a community of faith, we possess all the soils. The good soil, the shallow soil, the rocky soil, the thorny soil. All of it. This doesn't make us bad people or mediocre Christians. It just means that we are human. We are not finished products. So please, don't get discouraged when you're just not feeling it on a Sunday morning, or when you try to pray, but your mind is racing all over the place. Remember that your life is a patchwork of different soils. Hold on and wait for the good soil to emerge in your heart. It will. I promise you, it will. It may not be today or tomorrow or even the next day, but the good soil is coming. And when it does, there's that incredible synergy of faith and action. When the Spirit moves and blesses a particular ministry or something in your life and nothing can stand in its way. The good soil is where hope is generated and things blossom. It's where we feel closest to God. It's where our hearts are fully open rather than only partially so. And that's the promise deeply embedded within the parable of the sower. But even as we focus on the soil this morning, let's not overlook the sowing itself. If you've ever planted grass, you can relate to this part of the story. If your lawn's a bit spotty, you go out and buy a bag of seed at Home Depot, and you spread the seed on the bare spots. You don't spread it on the driveway or areas where the lawn is already lush, or in the flower beds, or in your neighbor's yard. You put the seed where you want to grow grass. It's fairly obvious, right? It would be a waste of seed and therefore a waste of money to do it any other way. But that's exactly what the sower is doing in this story. If we view the sower as a metaphor for God, then God is a pretty lousy gardener, or at least a wasteful one. Old MacDonald himself would never sow seed in places he knew it would never grow, like on paths or rocky ground or among thorns. I'm not a great gardener. I'm certainly no farmer. But even I know this is not how you sow seed. You don't just recklessly throw it all over the place. It must be sown with care and intentionality. But the point Jesus is making here is not about efficient gardening tactics. He's talking about the abundant grace of God. A God who spreads love with reckless abandon. A God who opens his heart to everyone. A God who wants to be in the midst of everything and in the midst of everyone. And God's grace will continue to pour down upon you over and over again until the good soil emerges and your heart overflows with the fruit of the Spirit. That's the good stuff. That's why we can endure those seasons of our lives that feel spiritually sparse. Because the good soil is always on its way. And God just keeps on sowing grace upon grace.